What's up, everyone? We're back with some more Etheria Restart. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. This is going to be our CBT4 2025 progression tier list update. This is for getting you into the game. What's going to give you the most progression and just some of the highest overall utility without having to dump a whole bunch of resources into these units. Any of these units can be really good in the game, and they all have their own respective areas that they excel at. I will say that some things are going to require more investment than others, and it's really important to keep that in mind. I will have it linked down below to the previous tier list that's going to dive a little bit deeper into the tiering and giving a deeper understanding as to why the units were tiered, specifically based off of a lot of the testing that was done. Of course, with this video, we're going to be just quickly overviewing the units that are currently tiered, and then we are going to be trying to place the brand new units that are coming in this current beta. The things that caused or allowed these units to be tiered the way that they are is based around their performance in early PvE and PvP. Keep in mind, like I mentioned before, that some of these things are going to be subject to change, and with a lot of investment and even more investment maybe than some other units, some units are definitely going to shift. There's a lot of different gear sets, a lot of shell companions, which we're getting some new ones for that are going to definitely help with changing some of the tiering. But when we're looking at the base value of these units, this is where they stand. Number one we have is Leon. I've talked about Leon quite a bit in almost every video, but she's a mainstay, must invest, right? She has a ton of resources that is allocated to making sure that you're able to get through the game and also investing in her so that you can progress, right? Again, she is going to be a absolutely amazing AoE nuker with the ability to absorb strike prep so that she can rotate her own turn and just be able to clean up things on her own. But she also has the value of being able to take advantage of having more having a ton of buffs, which is going to allow her to do more damage with like her skill 1, for example. So again, just a damage dealer that's going to be extremely good and not only PvE but for PvP. Second unit here, which is going to be Lilith. Lilith is going to be our HP damager, and she's going to be one of your top picks for the directed summon banner. That's the banner that you get a guaranteed SSR in your first 40 summons. She's going to be one of my top choices personally that I feel like is going to give you a ton of progression. She has the graceful mischief, which is going to allow her to be able to not only inflict the opportunity of dealing HP damage to her opponents, but then also being able to stun them. And when she stuns them, they essentially just don't get a turn, which is great for you and terrible for them. And this works in, again, both PvE and PvP content. Next, in the third slot here, we have Ling Lo. Ling Lo is going to be one of your day 7 units that you basically are going to have a quest line for. If you complete the quest for her, you will be able to get a free copy of her. And she's going to absolutely change the game as far as pure healing for your entire account. She's going to offer you an AoE immunity, AoE healing, and then of course scaled efficiency with like her well prayer. There's a lot of different things that she essentially can give, but overall she's one of the best healers in the entire game, and she's going to be huge for keeping your team alive. Now we also have Rahu. Keep in mind, Rahu is another unit that I absolutely love. This guy is going to be one of those defensive nature oriented units. He just scales quite a lot, right? Like the big thing with him is the Wrath buff that he actually has, and this is going to increase the amount of defense that he can gain per, I think it's like up to 12 stacks. And there's a couple of different gimmick stats within that. He can transfer debuffs. He can also apply a overall defense buff to the entire party, and this is going to allow him to be an insane damage dealer. Keep in mind that all of his damage actually comes from how high his defense is. So because he's tanky, it's really hard to deal damage to him in the first place, but also that then does scales his damage, which is super insane. So again, that's another reason why he is tiered here. Now we have Close coming in. Keep in mind, Close is another unit that you technically can use the directed summons for, but she is going to have a limited summons banner when the game first release. So with Close, she is going to be an absolutely insane unit because she has the ability to absorb and just basically manipulate strike prep, right? And that's something that's going to be pretty huge for her. Being able to manipulate that, she's able to inflict a defense break, and as well as increasing the amount of damage that a opponent can take is also going to be another huge component to her gimmick. So this is something that's going to be extremely valuable in, again, PvP and PvE PvE content, right? Tiamat, one of my favorite units, one of the only transformation-based characters in the game currently. She's actually going to have a few different things that you're going to be utilizing, which is number one, she can AoE taunt, right? And that's pretty huge. AoE taunts are great. This is going to allow her to be able to control and basically utilize the fact that she has all of this meat shield and just all this bulk that opponents can hit into, right? Now, she can also give shield to your entire party and heal over time, so that's another big aspect to what she's bringing to the table. And then she has her unique buff called Bloodshed, which is going to increase the healing efficiency that she outputs. And as she builds up these stacks, this is ultimately going to take her to her ultimate form, which is going to be the ultimate Dragon Mother form. And in that form, she's basically going to get one skill where she just nukes everything, and the damage is based off of her own HP. So again, another high in value character that I feel like is extremely great for progressing because it doesn't really require much to actually build her properly. Now, we also have Heinrich in here. Keep in mind, Heinrich is one of the light dark characters. He's a dark character, but he's definitely a scary one. He's really good. Like I've mentioned before, if you can get your hands on him, he completely changes your account. What he's going to be able to do is he's going to allow you to be able to prevent opponents from being able to gain buffs, and then he can increase how much crit damage an opponent takes, and as well increase the amount of and really the chance of him critting, right? So that's a huge component to his kit. Another thing is too is that he also can inflict an anti-heal with his second skill, and then with the first skill, he's going to also be able to inflict that last word again, which is the gimmick of allowing him to be able to increase the crit damage that an opponent takes, as well as the chance of him critting more often. So the dude can absolutely be a powerhouse with nuking, single target, AoE. He has it down pat. Now, another one of my favorites here we have is Hell Kid, right? So Hell Kid is another massive unit that I would say a lot of people are going to want to pick up at some point, invest in, because he grants a unique ability called Shroud Barrier, where not only are you going to have to deal with a bulky attack scaling shield, but you're also going to have to deal with the fact that it has immunity intertwined or infused into it, so you cannot do anything debuff oriented to him or any of his allies while they have Shroud Barrier. Now, keep in mind that the Shroud Barrier is going to have a kind of like extra effect to his skills if he's under the Shroud Barrier effect, so he'll be able to deal more damage if he's under Shroud Barrier. He can also inflict attack breaks, which is really good, and he can also stun in the skill 1. And like I mentioned before, this is both applied to the skill 1 and the skill 2. If he has that Shroud Barrier, he's going to absolutely do an insane amount of damage, and then as well as being able to bulk protect his entire party and himself. So absolutely insane unit. Doki Doki, definitely one of the best enablers in the entire game. This is another light dark character, but again, one of the things that she offers is just completely unique to her in the entire game. I mean, it's the fact that she offers a ability called Data Stream. Data Stream is going to allow her to give a 2.5% speed and also damage dealt increase, and this can stack up to 12 times. It is undispellable, so it is a problem. This means that on top of a speed up buff, she could be giving additional speed. On top of a damage buff, she could be giving additional damage that's outside of those buffs, right? And these count as its own, and this is the Data Stream is its own buff, which counts separately from those buffs, right? Now, on top of that, she also can give an entire speed up buff to your party, which is pretty huge. And then she also can reduce cooldowns as well in the party. So that's something else that makes it really, really nice with how she operates. And it's kind of like a, like she'll cool down one person and then it will move to the next character that has the lowest cooldown, for example. Same thing with the strike prep that she has in the skill 3. It will move whoever is the lowest, and then if they pass another character, she'll move them up. And she does that for a certain amount of times. I think it's like 8 times on the skill 3, I think. And I'm trying to remember on the skill 4, it's like 5 times. I think that's what it is, right? And then of course, she's able to apply the backup, which is going to allow her to get closer to applying the Data Stream, which is what you're trying to prevent if you're going up against her. But that's absolutely what you want if you're using her, right? So one of the best enablers in the game. Now we also have Rin, okay? So Rin is going to be, I call her Oni. I don't know exactly what her race is in the game, but I think she's an Oni. I'm not 100% sure, but she does have a giant gourd. I did mention her in the SR video. She is absolutely insane. She's going to be able to inflict a AoE taunt. She has an attack break in the skill 3, and she also does damage based off of her defense as well. On top of that, she can then buff, so she can give a defense up and as well as shield, and that is something that is going to be absolutely huge to allowing her to allow you to deal more damage, but also taking less damage. And then she has a taunt in her skill 1, so she has a ton of value there. We have one of the progressing healers that I feel like until you get Ling Lao, and maybe even after, you still would use this character, Sania here, because Sania actually, again, is going to be a reviver. There's not a lot of units that you have that have this capability, and this could be a huge clutch situation unit that's not just situational. She actually works for a lot of content. The cool thing is that she has the revive, the all-powerful protection buff that she has as well is super huge, so it increases max HP by 20%, and that will go up to 3 stacks. It cannot be dispelled either, so that's another huge asset that she has. But with that, she does have the ability to be able to purify and heal the 2 allies with the lowest HP threshold, and basically with her heal efficiency, it will increase for every 1% of HP that she loses, and this is not capped. So that's another reason why that is also really OP. And then she of course can increase her own strike prep with her skill 1, right? So absolutely insane unit. Now we have Gray here, that's also tiered in SSS. I've mentioned Gray quite a bit, but I feel like Gray just works, right? Gray is great because what he does is he essentially enables your entire party to do damage and also to do more damage, right? So with the skill 3, he's able to actually inflict a AoE defense break, and that's going to do quite a bit of damage. Now, if he also crits on this then will deal an additional amount of damage, and then you'll also get that 2-turn defense break, right? Now, keep in mind that with the skill 2, he can give your entire party a 30% crit rate up buff for or a crit rate up buff for 30%, and then on top of that, he gains an extra turn, which usually I think the way his AI works, it's usually skill 2 into skill 3, and then you'll go into a skill 1, which is basically going to be a massive damage ability that then allows him, if he crits, to push his turn up by 25%. So dude is absolutely disgusting. I feel like, again, these are just some characters that just give you a lot of value. Now, Chiaki here, which is kind of funny, they used to call her, I think it was Chiaki the Viol. Now they call her Chiaki the Echo. She's another unit that's also going to be extremely high in value. She's not only going to prevent strike prep reduction, but then she can also grant you an attack buff, so you can do damage. She can help enable how much damage you can do. She's going to essentially prevent you from being able to have your turn meters pushed back, and then on top of that, she also has the ability, if there's already buffs applied, then it will turn into the Ave Maria, which is going to prevent your strike meter from being pushed back, and then can also push the strike meter forward. So that's something that actually makes her super huge. She can also purify or remove debuffs with her skill 1, and granted, it might not be much, but it is something, right? So she is still really, really good for rotations. We have Valerian here, which is right next to Lily, so right between Chiaki here. We have Valerian. Valerian is another unit that has a very unique ability. She's an HP redistributor, as well as a unit that has an ability called Hazy Dream. With Hazy Dream, this is going to allow her to give shield to the entire party, and with that, everybody's not only going to be protected, but it's also going to be a death prevention ability. So if she is, or her, or I think an ally as well, are about to die, it will pop the bubble, and instead of them dying, it will actually heal them, and she will come out of the Hazy Dream. Keep in mind, when she's in Hazy Dream, she also can't have her strike prep reduced, which is kind of insane, and she's also immune to control effects. She can grant invincibility with the skill 2 that she has as well, and then she also can heal over time, and if the ally is below a certain percentage, then she'll extend that heal over time as well. So she's really, really good for sustaining and keeping your team going, right? Now, lastly here, we have Lily in the Triple S. Lily, again, is another high in value. She's a light dark unit, right? I will say it is kind of nice that the light dark units are actually as good as their rarity makes them rare, right? She's very, very good. She has a cooldown reduction in her skill 3 with the twin trick. That's something that's going to allow her to also push strike prep, right? So that's something that she can apply to not only herself, but only one other target or ally on the team. So that's something that, you know, you want to just kind of be aware of. But yeah, with the twin trick, if anyone that she designates to have that has it, she can immediately reset all the skill cooldowns for allies with twin trick, right? Now, on top of that, she also can grant a speed up buff. And then also, if someone already has twin trick, she will give them a crit damage up buff. So she's super insane for extra damage, rotating into your turns faster. She's really good for that. Now, lastly, with the twin strike or twin trick in the skill 1, that's just going to be something that she utilizes to help further push the strike prep of some other allies. And then, of course, she will then get an assist from any ally that's under the twin trick buff. With the remainder of the tier list, we have our SS, S, A, and B ranks. I will have the other tier list video linked down below so you guys can get a little bit more of an in-depth explanation on these units and their placement. I will cover some of the SS units really briefly though. With the SS here, we have first Sania. One of the big things with her, she's a high investment character. I actually beat everything in the game with utilizing her, Obel. I was using a couple of other units as well, but just keep in mind that a unit like that can work, but she definitely requires a ton of investment, skill ups, and she definitely needs really solid gear. So considering that also DOT has certain areas in the game where DOT just doesn't apply, when she's not able to apply any of her DOTs, her kit literally falls apart. And that's the same thing with Obel as well. Obel's great and he absolutely slaps wave clearing content and does an amazing job. I would even say their synergy is just absolutely insane together, but they run into this very same exact issue, which is why I couldn't comfortably place them in early game progression tier lists in Triple S, because they're really going to become a hindrance for most players, especially for those that are just like more casual. Maybe some of the super big brain, players that are more into that, like myself, would be able to make do with them, because I did do it personally, but I did see how I wasn't able to really fully invest in certain things because I was dumping so much more resources into those units, right? Yang, again, another strike prep unit. He's able to do a crit rate buff and attack buff to your entire party, so he's great, right? Like, he does some pretty solid damage, but I feel like in comparison to a lot of the other things, like again, compared to Gray, I feel like Gray just does it a little bit better, right? Dinah is another unit that's going to be great. She has the erosion abilities, which are going to be super huge for you to be able to deal more damage. On top of that, she does have the vulnerability in there as well, which is pretty huge. So she's great. Defense breaker, she has a lot. Damage boosting as well. Like, she's just huge. She's a huge unit. But I feel like one of the things is that in the very beginning, you're not going to be slapping all these units on your account on a team comp, right? And you have units like Leon, for example, that is going to be in that attribute like slot for the most part. So I will say that she's probably a unit that you'll pick up a little bit later on and definitely put on a team with a unit like a Leon, for example. But I definitely don't think that she's going to be the very first unit that you'll full send or put a ton of investment into, because there's other units that just give you way more. Now with Kazami here, Kazami is another unit that I absolutely love. She does have the ability to be able to reduce cooldowns, but that's something that you have to fully invest in. Again, that's going to be something that's huge when you start to really flesh out your account, but in the very beginning, she's not going to necessarily be required, or you're not really going to have the resources to really micromanage just investing in just a unit that can cool down versus some of the other units that's going to directly just be able to clear things, right? The other thing is too, is that you have to tune her properly as well. So she does need proper modules and a really good shell for her kit to work immensely well, right? There's one shell in particular, but we'll get into that in a whole nother video. Now, of course, here we have Fangus. I'm gonna come back to Kachi in a second. Fangus is another one, and I wanted to just group him really quickly with Sania and Obel. He's gonna run into the poison issue with some content, but in the content that he works extremely well in, he's great, right? Fengus is a DOT speed reduction unit with his skill 3. He does have the passive where basically he has the chance to come in and assist. So he's great for follow-up damage. And then of course the skill 1, he's going to also apply a DOT. So just kind of keeping that in mind, DOT is extremely powerful, but early game, it's hard to put DOT into like the higher ranks because they're a little bit more of a requirement when you're talking about what gear they need or modules and shells that they might require to make them work. And then again, there's the issue that they just don't work in some content, right? Now, Kachi the Guard is another unit that's great for buffing. He is able to grant immunity. Keep in mind, we do get Ling Lao for, free, so there is that. He does have the chance of increasing his effect accuracy, which is like pretty unique. And with the effect accuracy, that's going to just allow him to be able to land some of the things that he's able to do with the skill 2, which is the speed down debuff. He is also able to set back strike prep, which is just pushing back turn meter gauge, and he has some damage coming out of the skill 1 that can also reduce the crit damage of an opponent, right? So that's just what he brings to the table. It's still really nice. Now these 2 units here in SS, which I'll mention lastly before we place our last or our newest units, these units offer a ton of value in my opinion. There are rarity units, right? So lowest rarity units in the game, but they absolutely are units that get slept on that do really well, and they're easy to invest in, but I don't think they necessarily compare to the SS necessary. Or sorry, to the SS or SSR units that are placed and or even SRs that are placed in SS. So number 41 is going to be the girl here with the white hair. She basically is able to increase strike prep by 35% and give a attack up buff in her skill 3, which is huge. She has a single target heal that also can do, I think it's a heal over time for 3 turns, which is pretty nice. And then she can also anti-heal or heal block. So she's really a low investment, nice unit that you can throw in for that gimmick, right? Like anti-healing if you need it, pushing your turn, and then of course also being able to give you more damage. She has that in her kit. And another one here is Ashu. Ashu is a absolutely insane R. He actually, in my opinion, might be one of the strongest R rarity units in the entire game. But what he's able to do is he has an AoE silence in his skill 3. On top of that, he also can inflict DOTs with his skill 2 AoE, and then in the skill 1 he can inflict a speed down. So this guy has a ton of value. He also increases his skill damage based off of how much speed he has. So the more speed he has, the more damage he does. And he actually kind of excites me to see like some of the higher rarity units that might come in the game based off of speed. So it's kind of unique to see an R rarity that has this sort of value. And this was actually one of the units that allowed me to get into the top 50 in RTA was this R rarity. So I just want to throw that out there, okay? Absolutely insane freaking unit, okay? Now for everybody else, like I said, guys, definitely make sure that you guys check out the other tier list video. Keep in mind, just as far as an overall overview, these units are not bad. They just require way more investment to get them to work, or they have very niche uses, right? So that's essentially that. Now we're gonna get into placing the brand new Animus that are coming into the game here, because again, this is something that is going to be what a lot of people are going to need to know, because again, these units are super strong. Now the very first one that we have here is Silence. Okay, I'm gonna actually be placing Silence. Man, this always happens. I always feel like this is like a rough one, but I will say for early progression, Silence can be quite amazing. Now, the reason why that is, and I'm going to actually place her here in SS, the reason why that is because Silence actually has in her skill 3, it's called Grim Deluge. She's able to inflict an attack break and a crit rate down debuff, okay? Now, the thing about this is that reducing the attack and the crit rate of someone means that they can't get that doubling of damage, which is what crit usually does, and then they hit less damage in the first place because of the attack break. Now she also has a passive where she is able to give a shield called Rain Curtain. Now this absorbs 40% of the damage and then reflects 75% of the absorbed damage, and then increases effect res by 30% while active. Now the thing about this is that this makes it to where landing debuffs will come harder. She reflects damage, so it just makes it scarier to hit, and this is really going to be really effective against single target nuking characters that want to hit hard. She's going to punish them back. And so I can't like just completely like say that's not that amazing, because even without skill up investment, the ability itself does a ton, right? And then of course she's able to inflict with her toxic drizzle one of the following debuffs, either DOT, silence, or oblivion, which is basically making it to where targets cannot trigger passive effects. And there's a ton of characters that will utilize passive effects, and so the fact that she can actually nullify and prevent that with her skill 1 is actually quite insane. Even though it is randomly 2 of the following debuffs, you have a 2 out of 3 chance that it's going to be oblivion, essentially, right? So like that's kind of one of the things that I would say gives her a ton of value. I feel like she's going to be great for early progression. And again, it's, even though she is doing one of her abilities is DOT, that's not the basis of what she's doing. She's really a debuffer with some damage and a sustainer buffer, right? So she has some of that aspect in her kit, and because it's a passive, it's just going to always work, which is really, really cool. And this is also something that happens at the end of her turn. So I was just like, yeah, that immediately is insane. Now Hoyan, I'm going to actually be putting into, I feel like she kind of falls into a very similar situation. I'm gonna actually put Hoyan into S tier for right now. I feel like she's amazing, not early game though. The reason why is because Hoyan needs a ton of different things. And when I was actually like play testing her, investing in her, getting her built up, trying to see like how she worked, where she worked, etc. The thing about her is that she's definitely a unit that's going to be insane in PvP. She's gonna be a top tier unit either way in PvP. But the main thing about how her gimmicks work is that she needs to be consuming her HP. That's not really something you want to do too much when you're first starting out. You're not going to have a whole bunch of different ways to, you know, create more like tank to your character. Keep in mind, you're working with lower tier modules. So Hoyan is going to be great. Like she's absolutely going to work where she works. But some of the big things is that she has the consumption of her HP in her skill 3. And then she's going to deal damage, which it's a ton of damage, 480% damage to a single enemy. And for each 10% of her HP that is lost, she ignores their defense by 6.5%. Now, the other thing is too, is that she does have a passive called Fleeting Glance, where she's going to gain a stack of attack of 40%, and this cannot be dispelled. Now, the thing is I think that this stacks up to 3 times. So the thing is that her damage can ramp quite a bit. So you're really honestly making this character typically very slow, but she's going to want to have high damage parameters. Like you're going to want some crazy damage on her, high attack, high crit damage, so that she can hit as hard as possible when she gets her turn. Now, the other thing is too, is that she can proc an anti-heal in her skill 1, but I feel like this is not a character that's going to be essential for a couple of different reasons. One, she's not AoE, right? AoE is going to be your best friend in the very beginning of the game. It's going to help you with controlling the scenario and the situation at much lower level intervals. And she's a single target unit. So she's going to be better when she gets the proper investment, but she's not going to give you that right away, right? So that's where we're going to be placing her for right now. Now, we have next up Veronica. Now, Veronica is another unit I'm going to be placing into Triple S. I feel like she offers a lot of value for PvE and PvP. Reason being is that in the skill 3, she is able to steal buffs. That's already huge. Now, she can then redistribute those buffs amongst the entire party, and then she grants Soul Ward, and Soul Ward is probably one of the most clutch abilities in the entire game, where she is able to prevent the entire party from their HP from falling behind or falling below 1 point, right? So they can't be killed. It's basically like a it's kind of like I don't want to call it a invincibility, but kind of sort of in a way. It's one of those things that just prevents you from having to worry about your units dying and gives you a chance to maybe rotate into a heal, etc. Now, on top of that, she then is able to grant shield based off of the HP that she removes from the targets that she is hitting. Now, keep in mind, with just being able to straight up remove and just removing HP from all enemies equal to 20% of her own HP is kind of insane. And then being able to utilize that to share that and convert it into shield is huge, right? So that's more of an HP based ability, which is why, like, for example, units like Lilith, I placed her in triple S because of those types of things. And then, for example, in this skill 1, you have an attack break, and then she's also able to increase her own strike prep when she is attacked. So she's going to be able to rotate really well. I just feel like that's a ton of value that you're getting from that, because it's going to give you the things that you need, which is surviving. It's not about 3-star clearing in the beginning. It's not even about 2-star clearing. It's about surviving, because if you can survive, that means you're getting resources. If you can't survive, you're not getting anything, right? So that's another reason why we had to place her where we placed her, right? So that's that. Now, next up is one of the new units. We haven't actually had a chance to talk about her, but this is Dorothy the Wisher. We're actually going to be placing Dorothy for what she does. I feel like I'm actually going to place Dorothy in S tier. I feel like what she does is pretty solid. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of get what she gets from other units that also offers more like value or utility, but she's basically able to increase the strike prep of a ally by 50%. She also gives them a crit damage up buff, right? She reduces all the skill cooldowns by 1 turn for that target or that ally that she's aiming at, and the effect basically will increase strike prep. It can trigger a crit, and then when it does, the strike prep is doubled. So basically what happens is that if there's a crit that happens from this target, it basically will double the amount of strike prep that essentially will happen, right? So that can be huge. That can go from basically a unit only getting 50% to 100%. Is essentially what that is when it's maxed out. But again, that's a little bit of investment, not crazy because she is an SR unit, but that is something that she is going to be able to essentially give. Now, in this skill 3, what you're going to have as well is a crit rate up buff and then the life leech, which is going to convert 30% of the damage dealt into the HP of the person that has that. Now, she's also going to be able to purify 1 debuff, and if the purifying effect triggers a crit, it will then purify 2 debuffs. So this is one of the unique gimmicks about this character, is that her abilities can crit, right? And they're not damage abilities. So with that, crit rate on her is actually really good, and it's going to allow her to basically double the effects of her abilities. Now, the same thing goes with the skill 1. She's able to do some damage on there. She can increase her strike prep by 20% for a random ally, and if it crits, it will then increase it by 30%, so it goes up an additional 10%. So it's not anything that's like super necessary, but I will say that if you have investment in her, it's going to be really nice. Something fun that you can have work in PvP. I feel like that's going to be really insane. But for PvE, again, I don't think it's going to be one of the high value things that you're going to be aiming for or targeting. Now, lastly, out of the new units here, we have to place the new Kazuyo the Revere. I feel like Kazuyo the Revere, in my opinion, is going to be up there in Triple S. Reason being is because she's the only unit in the entire game that can do damage to sleep units and not wake them up. So this basically makes it to where anytime she's in a situation with a sleep debuff, she's only getting the, or really only utilizing the aspect of it, which is the increasing the damage taken that opponent takes by, I think it's 45%. So she's absolutely insane. Now, on top of that, she can inflict an attack break. She also, with the sleep, like I said, it's basically more of a stun than it is a sleep when it's her on the team, because anytime she hits, hits, they do not wake up from the sleep like they normally would. And so it's not 45%, it's 25% damage that they take extra. So it's super insane. On top of all of that, you basically then have in the skill 1 where she's able to reapply the sleep for 2 turns at a 30% chance. So she's just really insane, and she's going to pair up extremely well with units like Valerian, who isn't typically hitting, right? But she also is able to inflict sleep. So that's a thing, you know, you kind of can think about for progression, like kind of compositions and stuff like that. But overall, this is going to be the tier list for CBT4. Once again, we will be revisiting this as we get closer to the release. We do some more testing. We might come across some units that are just extremely high in value, and they might adjust or shift. It just kind of all depends on what ends up being tested. Like I said, this is not indefinite, but this was and has had a lot of testing done already. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you want to see a more in-depth explanation for some of the other units that we didn't go over in this video, make sure that you guys check out the link down below so that you can go check out the CBT3 video for that tier list. Okay, so that's going to be basically that with this one, guys. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel. I hope to see some of you guys at some of the live streams, man. You know, I feel like we have a ton of fun whenever we're streaming. There's a lot to learn. I want to try to help as many of you guys as possible and really just enjoying Etheria together. So that's going to be that, guys. Everyone stay blessed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.